Hi, everyone. My name's Ken Ehrlich. I am a proud alumnus of Ohio University. I graduated before anyone on this watching this was born. But I had a great time there. I had a wonderful 4 years. I was in the school of, and then it was called the Journalism School. Now it's called the College of Communications. But I learned an awful lot, and it prepared me for a life doing what I do, which is basically produce television and mostly music and television, which is where I got to meet our guest right now, who has had an amazing couple of years. I was fortunate enough to work with him and his sister on the Grammy show this year ago, January, which was the last time we saw each other. Because after a triumphant night that night, things changed, and everybody kind of headed to their homes and have been there pretty much ever since. So I don't think we can start tonight, Phineas, without really talking about where you've been the last year and what you've done and how it's been to come from this incredible night where not only did you win a bunch of Grammys, but you won Producer of the Year Grammy, which is for a producer is the cat's pajamas. They still say that. Sorry about that. But you've kept busy. But I'd love let's talk about the year, and then we'll go back and talk about last year.
Great to
Phineas,
see you, Mr. Ehrlich. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for having me. All right. Well, the last year, I mean, at the risk of oversimplifying things, it's been a unique year. We spent the brunt of it at my house in Los Angeles, recording Billy's second album, and it's been a really wonderful creative process. We've had more time to work on something than maybe we've ever had in our lives. The first album was made on and off tour, in tour buses, in hotel rooms, and this album we've just had such a incredibly consistent routine, and that's been a real joy. And the sort of theme of fear and uncertainty and stress that has accompanied this year in so many ways. My best coping mechanism has been making this album with Billy. So I'm very grateful to have had the excuse.
Yeah, and I guess it won't be long before we all get to hear it. I'm curious. I've talked to a number of people and continue to talk to them about this past year, and there's like a dichotomy. There are some artists that are really grateful for the year that they've had, which it sounds like you are, and there are others just that never quite got over the loneliness of it, or in some cases the issue of being, believe it or not, away from people, away from an audience, away from people who were there to appreciate what it is they do. I'm curious as to which side of the coin you fall on with regard to that.
I found that it comes in waves. The first period of time, maybe about a month, I was so distracted by the news and the news cycle and keeping up with everything and changes in information, and that kept me from working, and ultimately that led me to feel very lonely and isolated and sort of uneasy. And I think largely because most of the fulfillment that I get in my life is from making music, be it on a stage in front of an audience or in front of a computer recording it or in front of a piano. And so I found that the more music I made, the better I actually felt, because at least I had control over it and I had, purpose to my days. I mean, I'm sure you remember, I feel like everyone watching this does, like there was a period where there was no distinguishing like a weekend from a weekday, a month from a month. Yeah. So the more music I made, the happier I was. So I made a lot of music.
I was looking through some of the production that you've done, and I think I remember when we talked before, you did a good deal of that with other artists, obviously with Billy, yes, but with other artists during this period. So, and we don't need to break it down, but Selena Selena Gomez, Tove Lo, Justin Bieber, Camila Cabello, Julia Michaels, J.P. Sachs, Demi. Um, and I'm sure some of that was before this past year, but a lot of it was during this past year. So how did you do that? Obviously, you did it remotely, but what was that like?
The songs that I produced within the past year were done remotely. I would Zoom with the artist, FaceTime them. They would talk about their vision for it, and I'd get sent a vocal and maybe a piano or a guitar track, and I would build the whole rest of everything around that. There were some things that came out during the past year that I had written in person with an artist prior to lockdown, and then they've come out during lockdown as delayed releases go. Um, but it was a very interesting challenge to sort of find ways to be as connected with someone as possible without breathing the same air, being in the same space. I found writing with other artists remotely to be very difficult. I know some people have gotten really good at it. My friend Ryan Tedder has gotten great at it. I don't really like it at all. I like sitting next to people at pianos, playing the chords, letting them hum over it, being inspired by them. And the latency on applications like Zoom is too great to do that. You can't really make music at the same time. So it's mostly been production with other artists and not writing, and then writing and production with my sister who I see in person.
Which brings up an interesting question because I won't ask you to name them, but if obviously there were at least two or three where you didn't really know the artist until you got into this situation with them. And we all know that going back to what you just said about the personal nature of proximity being such an important part of what it is in any creative art.
Absolutely.
I wonder, how did you overcome what could have been awkward, but and did it work with pretty much everybody that way? Because again, the creative process overcomes the distance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I find that the better I can get to know a person as a person, the better I'm going to do at executing their vision and producing a song that they like. And so I don't think, I think any person that I didn't know prior, when I was going to start working with them, I would FaceTime them. We'd talk for about an hour. We'd talk about life. We'd talk about their family. And then maybe we'd talk about the song, just so I could get to know them, their influences. And then you have this great excuse to continue your relationship with them, which is working on a piece of music together. That was a real privilege. I've also done a lot of sort of like, prior to COVID, I'd go get coffee with people I'd never met a lot to get to know them. There's a lot of wonderful songwriter, producer, artists that I may end up working with, but I want to know them before I end up working with them. So I'll just have our teams get together and schedule like a meeting at a coffee shop. And it's some of my favorite sort of like encounters of my career have been that way. This is a sad anecdote, but there's an incredible songwriter, producer named Busby, and he passed away in 2019. And I'd only ever gotten coffee with him. I'd never got to work with him. And I got coffee with him not long before I think he was diagnosed. And so I felt so lucky to just get a couple hours to tell him how big a fan I was of his work, and talk music, talk family, we both live in Los Angeles, both on the east side. And I'm so lucky to, I think it's one of the luckiest part about the world of music is how many people you get to cross paths with who you have so much respect and admiration for. And so I try to bring that into any collaborative experience I'm going to have. I want to have an excuse to get to know people.
Did you wind up working with him? I don't remember whether you did or not.
I never worked with Busby. No, I only ever got coffee with him and thought he was amazing. And then, usually people are sort of like booked up for a while. So like we got coffee, he was booked up for a while. I was probably on tour at the time. He got diagnosed, he died. Like that was my relationship with Busby. It was pretty pretty devastating because I would have been very thrilled to.
He was a very special guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a little getting coffee story.
Please.
It's supposed to be more about you, but this is a fun story. You like it. And what it really is, it speaks to the fact that I don't think some of the things that I've been able to do over the years could have been done in this situation. And yet there's a reality to it. It had to be. This was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, Same Love came out. And I knew I wanted to do it on the Grammys. And I knew I wanted, and I had an idea. I had this story has been told, but you'll get a kick out of it. I had talked to my daughter who had gone to see them. My daughter's gay, lesbian, and I asked her about going to see them because I had not seen them before. I never booked an act before I've seen them, and so she told me that when she went to see them a couple of times, that as part of their show, gay couples would get engaged, or they would announce their union, or whatever. And I thought, geez, that's really special. And I wanted to, I had, as you know, ultimately we wound up doing it on the show, but I was set to meet them. I had never met them before. And I still remember it was a place called Honey's Fried Chicken in Culver City. You may know it, and we had lunch there, and we stand at the counter and you order your fried chicken, you sit down, and here are these two guys, both of whom I respected because I really I loved what they did, particularly with that song.
Yes.
And so we're in the middle of fried chicken, and they didn't know, but I mean, I was going to make them an offer to do the show at that moment. And of course they were thrilled. And then I said, and I have an idea. I said, I don't know if you're going to like it or not, but, we'd like to perform a number of mixed marriages, to be very diverse in what we're doing. Some gay couples, some straight couples, some bi couples, but, and I thought their jaws dropped, because I think that might have been the last thing in history that they were expecting to hear. And of course they said yes, but it was like, I don't know if I could have done that like this over the phone. I don't think I could have had that kind of conversation.
Yeah, there is a human level of connection to being in the same physical space as somebody. I think it's a lot to do with body language, and you can really let your guard down with somebody in a room. And I mean, but we've all got, I go to therapy on Zoom every week, and I'm sort of continually impressed by how fluid that is ultimately. Even though I found it very comforting to be in the room, and she'd throw a weighted blanket over me, and I was, sit there in my weighted blanket. But yeah, I totally know what you mean. And again, like Billie and I, over this past year making her second album, I could not have made it if we weren't in the same physical space. So I'm grateful. It seems like it will be safe for everybody to be, with each other again at some point soon.
So I guess if I see you throw a weighted blanket over yourself, we're gonna go into uncharted territory. So we'll avoid that. But let's talk about you and Billie a little bit. We're headed toward that night 2 years ago in January, but we don't have to rush to get there because we all know what an amazing night it was. But I'm sure there are a number of fans who know the answers to these, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Sure.
About how this started and the first time you got together musically, and do you ever fight with each other, and do you ever the relationship exists on all these different planes?
Yeah, we fight all the time. I think that's one of the reasons it's great, because we don't listen. I think most, anytime I've ever watched a documentary or read an autobiography about a plural group of musicians working together, be it a band or a duo or a writing duo, they all fight. And I don't know how to fight with anyone better than my sister. And at the end of the day, there's such an undercurrent of love under everything that we never say anything that isn't with that sort of like love underneath it, even if we disagree about an opinion. And my experience growing up was I played in bands, and fighting with my best friends was much less good. I didn't like it at all. I felt like it put a strain on our friendship in a way that made me very uncomfortable. And um, I think that sort of like sibling connection that we have, where we're just ourselves around each other, and there's no facade, is such a privilege, and I don't take it for granted at all. We started collaborating together when she was 13 and I was 17, turning 18, and it was a couple songs, one of which she had written alone, one of which I'd written alone, um, and then a couple we started writing together. And yeah, it was what now has become kind of a common story, which was we uploaded the song Ocean Eyes to SoundCloud, sent it to some friends, put it on our Instagrams that only had like in the hundreds of followers. Maybe hers had 1,000 followers. She was more popular than I was. and um and that was kind of that. And then we realized that blogs had started to pick it up. And then a manager who I had been talking to about my band, Danny Ruckson, reached out about the song. We got, you know, a meeting in place with my mom and my sister and me, and Danny, who I knew previously, but not incredibly well. And that was kind of all snowballed from there. And we've had an overwhelming amount of luck in terms of who we have worked with. Danny and Brandon, our managers, we're so lucky to work with them, and they have been such wonderful, guides for us. I think about, the things that we wanted to rush in the beginning. Oh, we want to put this song out tomorrow. And, your managers go, like, let's wait a little bit so we can build some momentum on this and film a great video for it and develop a strategy on this. We owe a lot to John Janik at Interscope, Justin Lubliner at Darkroom, our publicist, Alexander Baker, is amazing. Tom Windish, Sarah Bullwinkle at Paradigm. Like, we just have people in kind of all corners that I feel so lucky to have. And I don't know, like I talk to, so not to out anybody, but I talk to friends who are artists all the time, and they always are complaining about their manager or their label or their publicist. And we don't, we joke around, we tease each other, but we're very lucky to have, we're not with the people we're with because we feel stuck with them. We feel very lucky to have the team we have. And so much of the credit for the success Billy and I have had is owed in part to all of them.
Well, they now have that for eternity, what you just said, which is great. And I just want to echo it. We've worked with your team a few times now, and particularly Danny and Brandon are wonderful to work with and very cooperative and very, they always give us the feeling that they're on our side as well as your side. And
totally.
It's collaborative. We can't do what we do without you doing what you do, and we hope that we're there to help when we can. So I want to go back to the relationship again.
Sure.
You're 4 years older than Bill.
Yes.
My son is about 5 years older than my daughter. They're both grown now, but they had rocky moments, and I could tell. I'm just curious. And by the way, we can move on from this. No. But my daughter worshipped my son. She followed him around. I think about the early days. I look about the times when they were like 4 and 5, and she was 5 and he was 9 or 10. And I wonder what the growing up, what was there that kind of a relationship, or sometimes it's the other way. I mean, and by the way, he tormented her. I mean, there were times when very quickly he put a little remote control, a little speaker under her bed, and pulled her from his bedroom and would just go, Dory. But that's, they're better now. But I'm just curious.
That's wonderful. I don't know if Billy worshipped me. I thought she was pretty awesome. But 4 years is a funny age gap, because for many years as a child, that's a eternity.
Mhm.
8 to 4 couldn't be more different people. 12 to 8 couldn't be more different people. So it wasn't, although we were, we did everything together. We were both homeschooled. We lived in a very small house. We were never distant, but we didn't gel or connect in the way that sort of fully formed people do until, she was about 11, 12, 13, and I was like 16, 17, 18. Just because of like developmental, you're just very young. And
That was about the time you started in the other music.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it was, a lot of the bleed over into our working in music was just that we started to have the same taste in music. We started to send each other bands, like, here, check this out. We'd make little playlists for each other. And um, but we see the world the same way, and I think that was really important. And I would die for her in a second. I just, I think as most big brothers would. And I've totally tormented her in my lifetime, right? As a kid, you know you're just, I think kids are sort of innately a little greedy, right? So if we're playing with toys or whatever, I'd just take it because I was a jerk. But there was always a lot of love there. um, and we both loved our parents too. It's been a very tight knit family for really my whole life, which is great. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, she's only, now a 19-year-old, and I'll always feel protective over her, but I have so much respect for her that I don't know that I feel like the sort of stereotypical, like, I gotta make sure she's safe. Like, I think she's really smart and um sensitive and wonderful, and so I will protect her in terms of assistance her whole life if she wants it, right? If she needs help with something, or if she has questions she needs answers to, I'll be there. But I don't want to parent her at all. I want to let her live her life.
You touched on something about your parents, and
Yep.
I don't know them very well, but I've gotten to know your mom a little better than your dad. 'Cause she's been
Oh,
around you, when you've been with us more. You can see that. She on the one hand she's very protective, but it's really more loving than it is protective. And
yes.
it's kind of, you can tell she's kind of watching out for you,
Yes.
but she's also contributory. She's very obviously very proud of you and very supportive of where you are and how you got there. And I
Mm.
know what conversations that I had with her when you weren't around were really about that.
Yeah. They're yeah, they're very proud, and they're to blame for a lot of it, which is wonderful. I mean, we're the byproduct of artistic parents who had a home full of, secondhand musical instruments, and taught us anything we were interested in learning, and allowed us time to sit and play instruments all the time. And we really truly love them, and they're not lame. um, they're annoying sometimes, and you know they're like, they suffer from any, the thing that anyone in their 60s suffers from, of like not quite knowing how to send a text without a million typos in it. And that's all fine. But we love them, and we respect their opinions, and they've given us a lot of leeway in our lives in terms of making choices and trying to aid our choices. I remember, it's a weird example, but when I was like 15, 14, I was like, I'm putting a lock on my door. I need some privacy as a 14, 15-year-old. I'm going to install a little deadbolt. And I I like went and got one with cash at like a hardware store and started installing it. And my dad was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm installing a lock in my door." My dad goes, "Well, stainless steel doesn't really match this house. Like, you probably should use a copper one." And he was like, "I have a copper one in the garage. Do you want me to grab it?" I was like, "Yeah." And he went and got it, and then he was like, like, screwed it in for me. And I was like, "Thanks." And he was like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And I could have just asked him. but I wanted to do the autonomous thing. And I think that's really the lesson that my parents sort of instilled. It's like, if I asked them for help, they were always happy to give me help.
So what started out as an act of rebellion turned to an act of I'm on your side. He basically defused your as a parent. I could say that.
Yeah.
He defused your independent your stand for independence at the age of 15.
Right. And if you look at it from a parental standpoint, in terms of like the chess game of parenting, I don't know if this is what he thought. Maybe he didn't. But if you think, wow, my son wants a lock on his door, I can either fight him about it and he'll probably still end up putting a lock on his door, or I can help him do it. And then he's not going to be angry or interested in hiding anything from me because I helped him do this thing. So smart. It was a good chess move on his part.
Smart. Very smart. So that leads me, that's a logical lead into talking about growing up. We're going to, trust me, we'll get you older soon. But, what your musical influence and what you listen to and what obviously they introduced you to a lot of things and
Yes.
your musical taste. I mean, I made a note that I wanted to talk about that one thing. What was it? American Cliche, which is so retro and so comes from ragtime or New Orleans or somewhere where you weren't, And I'm just curious as to what formed you musically from the ages of 5 to now.
Well, it was pretty broad. I remember there being my dad would burn these mix CDs that we'd when we had to go anywhere, like to a art class or anything around town, we'd listen to these mix CDs my dad made, and it was 50-50 stuff he'd loved for years. His favorite Beatles songs, his favorite Simon and Garfunkel songs, his favorite Yes songs, and then 50% stuff that he'd just heard from listening to the radio or Yahoo Launchcast or Pandora. So it was like, all that sort of great old stuff, Joni Mitchell, Beatles, and then Creep by Radiohead, Complicated by Avril Lavigne, Since You've Been Gone, Kelly Clarkson. And we had a real appetite for it, and we were being exposed to it by him at a really early age, like probably 4 or 5, like really young. And then as we got older and got our own MP3 players, it was self-discovery from wherever you find music as a child, a TV show, a commercial, related sections on iTunes, whatever. So that was our parents deserve all the credit for our sort of early exposure to a broad spectrum of old and new music.
I think it's really a tribute to them, and I'll tell you again from a much older perspective. I've over my long life of, as you know from the conversations we've had, I still love music, and I still love something that I heard for the first time 3 days ago, as well as going to New Orleans and seeing these heritage artists at Jazz Fest. They're amazing, but I kind of define people by there is an arc in pretty much everyone's life. From the ages of 10 to 20 is where you get formed musically. From 20 to 40 is when you kind of settle in. And what's happened, and we don't need to go into the sociological aspect of when hip hop came in and when punk replaced this or disco was here or whatever. But the reality is that most people at a certain point in their lives leave music as an important part of their life. It hasn't happened to me yet. I hope it doesn't. But I think, and I don't want to presuppose this about your folks, but it feels to me like, as you said, you said it, they're in their 60s. By their 60s, a lot of people have said, I can't relate to that anymore. So I'm not, and I'm glad that
they listen to music from their youth or whatever it is. They've sort of time capsuled themselves.
And I don't think your folks did that unless you tell me they didn't. They did.
Dude, my dad, especially my dad, although my mom too, in the last 5 years have been like, you should listen to this new thing I heard, on a Spotify playlist, or, saw it on YouTube, whatever. They're still they have a large appetite. I mean, before we started making music. But I remember my mom, you know, in her mid 50s calling me and being like, I just heard this song called Royals by Lord on KCRW. You got to check it out. I hadn't heard it yet. It was like right when that song started to break on, you know, alternative radio. And I remember hearing it and being like, wow, it's amazing. It's before the album or anything. And yeah, I admire that in them, and I hope we continue it. One of the things that I think they did that I'm excited to do, I really want to have kids, and I think they, in their sort of effort to expose us to music that they liked, they sort of distilled their favorite songs from their life thus far, right? And I think we don't often give ourselves an excuse to do that all the time. We're sort of listening to something current and maybe listening to a throwback, but we're not constantly listening to like every song we loved from the last 20 years. And I think having a kid might be a really fun excuse to do that, to be like, let me go through everything I've ever loved and see which ones still hold up, what's soured on me. I remember, you know that song by Crash Test Dummies, right?
Yeah.
I was like on that mix as a kid. Loved that song. It's like, this is so weird and cool, you know, just stuff like that, where stuff that you gets in your DNA as a young person and never leaves.
Well, again, I'm sorry to keep harping on this, but I'm now 2 generations into this, and I have my 3 grandchildren who are 7, 5, and 4. They're doing exactly that. Their parents are doing exactly that. And it goes back to the stuff that I never stopped playing for my kids because it was important to me. And they grew up with this really, you know, like you, a very eclectic tastes. I mean, my grandson, Zebby, who is 5, will call and say, "Hey, I just listened to this Billie Holiday record. You know,
So
did you know her?" There'll always be this kind of,
that's cool.
but man, it's so great to to see that if nothing else, that travels on.
With you, it's probably always yes.
There's a lot of yeses.
Did
There's a
you
lot.
know her? Yep. That's the Mr. Ehrlich vibe.
Yeah. Again, one other little story. It was, who was it? I think it was Pharrell. Was working on a record, and he came in. He was doing the Grammys that year, and I was playing some. I love New Orleans. I love the piano player. I love Dr. John. I love Alan Toussaint, Professor Longhair, Toots Washington, all these great piano players. So I was playing some. I think I was playing some Professor Longhair or something when he came in, and he just stopped. He said, "What's that?" And he said, I told him, and he said, "I've never heard that before." I said, "You need to know about New Orleans." And seriously, what happened was he was working on this record, and he sent me the record when it was finished, and the note was inspired by Mr. Ehrlich and New Orleans, Louisiana, because he had become a passion of his. You know,
that's awesome.
Anyway, let's go back to you. I'm sorry. But let's talk specifically about that song, because that did have all of that in American Cliche. Mm-hmm. Where did that come from, and how did you realize that and make it work?
I don't necessarily know. I wrote the brunt of that song several years ago now. I wrote the brunt of it in 2017 in the summer, and I think when I sit and play piano and write, which was the case with that song, when there's no drum beat behind it, there's no percussion, I play a little ragtimey, kind of always. And part of it is stuff I've loved my whole life. Ben Folds plays kind of ragtimey. Jack White always played kind of ragtimey. I loved like Disney soundtracks, like the Aristocats and stuff. And then I think part of it is that I'm left-handed, and so all my rhythm is in my left hand. Yeah. And so it's all kind of like don't like it's all sort of, it all has that kind of low rhythm component, whereas I think piano is like, if you think about it in sort of in really broad, simple terms, in especially pop music, the left hand is usually holding down the root and the right hand's doing all the complicated stuff. So piano is sort of a right hand dominant instrument, just like a guitar. Um, and
Melody versus rhythm.
yes, and so I kind of, just by virtue of being left-hand dominant, sort of flip that. And I've actually heard Ben Folds essentially say the same thing. Um, and so I think that's why that song has that like down, 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 like that sort of um, tilt to it. And yeah, it's kind of where my voice sits too. I really, that song is very like hilariously autobiographical. I wrote a lot of it sitting in this cafe in um, Paris, um, and just feeling like a real beginner. Every time I go to Europe, I feel like a beginner, because you want to speak, the native language out of like an effort to be like respectful, but you don't know how to say anything, you don't know how to pronounce anything correctly, and so you usually end up just like taking what you're given. If you order a drink and they bring it to you and it's a completely different drink than you wanted, you're like, merci, like thank you very much. And so that was the premise of American Cliche. And in terms of the production, I'm really excited to play live again at some point soon. And I was like, this is going to be so fun live. So that was a large part of the reason I produced it that way.
Yeah, I want to. That's one thing I do want to talk about. The hoped for and expected and long anticipated move to live. But I had one question, and I was kind of trying to cycle back to see if I had read it or not. I don't remember seeing anything about you taking lessons, either one of you. Did you? Huh?
We did not. Well, that's a little bit of a fallacy, but essentially we didn't. We took like remedial lessons as like 8-year-olds that we didn't like and didn't keep up with. It was sort of short-term lessons from an Italian man named Marco. It's very nice, but we just were too young to be as interested in the sort of regimented practice and persistence that it takes to get good at an instrument. So really the origin of our experience in playing instruments, Billy and me sort of 4 years offset from each other, was when I was about 11, 12. I was 11, I suppose. I came to my dad. I really wanted to impress a girl I had met. And I came to my dad and I was like, can you teach me how to play the song Beautiful Disaster by John McLaughlin on piano? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he has a pretty good ear, and he listened to the song and maybe looked up the chords online. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask him. And was like, it's pretty easy. It's D, and then it's G, B minor, G, essentially. And or like G sus or something. And he was like, and also that's like the chords for almost every song ever. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, pop music. He was like, chord structure is pretty similar. And he was like, so if you just change the order around of the chords you just learned, you can play like almost any song. And that like blew my mind. It felt like I'd hacked piano. I was like, that's insane. And of course, it's an oversimplification. Songs are in, um, you know, there's especially Beatles songs have a million chords per song, and they're complex, but there really are a lot of songs that share the basics. And so, I just became obsessed. I'd listen to a song, and that was sort of the beginning of my ear training. You go like, what is like the relation of these chords to each other? That's the root, and then there's the fifth, and there's the fourth, and that was kind of the beginning of it. And I sort of leaned on my mom for the same thing on guitar. My dad plays some piano. My mom plays some piano too, but my mom plays guitar. And so it was like, teach me some chords, teach me how to play Eleanor Rigby on guitar. And Eleanor Rigby is actually a good song to learn, because although the Beatles songs are incredibly complicated, Eleanor Rigby in terms of root is pretty much like C, E minor.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you want to learn the picking pattern, it's da na 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 na, like it's that whole wonderful cello part. But in terms of learning the root, it was very simple. And then you get to sing Eleanor Rigby and strum, and that's a thrill. So that was the origin of us playing instruments. And Billy kind of did the same thing, although she's more proficient on piano than she is at guitar. She does play some guitar, although she's spent a lot of time in acrylic nails in the last couple of years. You can't, unless you're Dolly Parton, it's pretty hard to play a show in acrylics.
You can't play open tuning very well. My favorite definition of country music while you were talking is three chords and the truth, and it doesn't get any more right than that, because that's it.
It's a great definition of the best songs in the world too. I mean, the truth is the most important part.
So I think we moved away from where we were a minute ago, and I wanted to get back to it. I think it was about what was it? I think we did go well. Let's get to. We don't have that much time left, so and I'm very proud of what you did to almost it's 14 months ago now, 15 months ago now.
Year and a half.
I'd love to know what that experience was like for you. And don't edit yourself. If I was an asshole, you can say I was an asshole. I'm proud, but it's not me. I want to hear more about what that experience was for you and where it landed at that moment in your career.
I didn't find you to be an asshole at all, Ken. It was a thrill. We watched the Grammys every year, Grammys and the Oscars. We watched both. Like that was our version of like the Super Bowl. We'd have friends over, we'd watch them together, and the Grammys were always the most exciting because the performances were so good. I remember the first year I really watched like every minute was the year Bruno Mars kind of broke out onto everything. Like it was when he opened the show with Runaway Baby. I just thought that was amazing, and I thought kind of all the performances that year, and it was hosted by LL, who I think is great. And so I just started loving the show every year and really looking forward to it. And obviously Billy and I've always been obsessed with music, and so always interesting to see who's nominated, who wins. And so doing it was just this huge honor. And I mean, I've said it a lot, and I've said it again this year in all my posts about this year's Grammys, which just happened. It's like being nominated is winning. Like that's such a huge victory. And also you're being celebrated with your peers. Like the category you're in, all the people in your category, you all get to share in that. You're all Grammy nominees. That's a thrill. And so that going into the day of the ceremony, having been Grammy nominated was like unbelievable. And then as we started to win all of them, that just became completely surreal and insane. Yeah, I mean, I kind of had this feeling of like, well, this is amazing. I can just cross this off it wasn't even on my bucket list. It was so insane. But I just sort of thought like, wow, I won a Grammy, and I'll have that for the rest of my life. And I don't, ever need to worry about that again. So I just felt very lucky, and sharing that with my sister. I mean, it was kind of a weird vibe of a day. Kobe Bryant died that morning. That was surreal and insane and tragic. And yeah, I mean, and then sort of we'd all heard like murmurings of COVID-19 at that point. So that was interesting. But the ceremony itself was a, wonderful celebration with my family, my girlfriend. We loved all the artists we were nominated with. We love Lizzo and Lil Nas. I've been a fan of Bon Iver, Vampire Weekend for years. Love Maggie Rogers. Who am I going to forget that somebody's going to be mad about? Who am I forgetting, Ken?
I don't know. With me, in terms of the nominations and things like that, it's gone. So,
Ariana Grande. We're big fans of Ariana.
Yeah. What I recall was
Honest Ray. Jesus, this is the issue. I have to remember this.
What did you just say? Oh yeah. I remember the meeting that we had at Janet's, which was when I met you. And it doesn't always happen that way, but we felt it seemed as though we were so on the same page.
Absolutely.
It's really, it was, and I will confess that part of it was a little local knowledge, because there was no way I was going to put you with the Billie Eilish dancers. There was no way we were going to talk about, it wasn't going to be about, it was going to be all I wanted to do, and all you wanted, fortunately, was to interpret that song, let the lyric live, let the arrangement live, We did add the choir, and that was your idea, which was a brilliant idea. But it was the whole idea of it was basically to not to get in the way, is the way I describe it an awful lot. And I don't think we did. I think we were very true to, to what that song was, and to trying to present the two of you in a way that you had not been seen before,
Right.
uh, and not just for the sake of being different, but for the sake of finding that other color, finding that other side. So that was what we were.
That
That was our goal.
that meeting was so funny, because we had been prepared for that meeting, and as I think is healthy to do anytime you're going to meet about creative, we had thought, okay, well, if he asks us what we want to do, what do we actually want to do? And we had devised, like, well, we want to do When the Party's Over. We want to do a stripped version of When the Party's Over that's, sort of bare bones, intimate, the opposite of the sort of like, there's going to be amazing, loud, vibrant, dynamic Lizzo type performances this year. We can't compete with Lizzo in that respect. She's unbelievable at that. So let's try to do this intimate thing. And then we got in the room with you, and you were like, I think you guys should do this intimate thing. And it was like you said all the things we were prepared to say if you asked. And then you're like, what do you guys think? We were like, yeah, exactly. So that's just a testament to how, I think, aware you are of the artists that you're working with, of their strengths, of their weaknesses. I think you really just nailed it.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. But
Sure.
What I loved was how quickly it got collaborative.
Right.
It was because we were on the same frequency. But and I think I threw out that lighting idea at that moment, and there was a great deal of enthusiasm, which had to kind of be revived when you came to your song.
Sure.
Which was a little worrisome, but at the end of the day, it was exactly the right thing. And I've noticed that since then, you've adopted that. We're not taking credit for it at all, but the two of you should never be hot lit. Is the answer? I mean, that's not true. You should be when you're doing an up tempo, or when you're doing something creative where that's good. But for that song, this lighting and the way we lit both of you was the answer. And I'm so glad that ultimately that got through, and that's what was realized. And just the moment of that reveal of the choir, which we were again very in sync with when they should come in and where they should be and what we wanted. They were a part of you, but they weren't a part of you. I mean, it's just I guess to the kids that are watching this, the value is, if you can, go find that performance, take a look at it, because what Phineas and I have just done, I think, is basically taken it apart for you, so you can see a little bit of what the creative process is that ultimately got us there, and that's something people don't see very often.
It's true. Good point.
Which leads me to actually talking about, there are a lot of people that are watching this that are thinking about doing what you do,
Sure.
Getting into this business. And I don't think we should. I think part of what we should talk about now is, your thoughts and advice that you might have for them, and what, give them a little direction. That's what they would. I'm sure they ask you that. So
yes,
let's talk about that for a bit.
Okay. Well, I have a really good piece of advice, which was told to me by someone, and I wish I remembered who, because I would give them credit now. But the good piece of advice is, why do you know? You should know why you want to do what you want to do, and that'll guide you. And I think that the thing that's great about that is that it allows you to set a totally different set of expectations, right? There's all these metrics of success and achievement. But at the end of the day, if you know why you want to do something, then you're doing it for the right reason, right? And I think that almost no one who ever wins a Grammy started making music to try to win a Grammy. And in my case, songwriting was a form of therapy. It's therapeutic. I started a band because I wanted to make music with my friends. We started playing shows because I wanted to see what that was like. And, I just have this like curiosity and obsession with different forms of music, be it, film scoring, writing songs for film, writing songs for other artists, writing songs for myself. And I defined success really early on as being working in music was my sort of be all and end all. I thought I want to work in music, and that really could have been, like we go to Westlake Studios sometimes to work with other artists under normal circumstances. We haven't been in the last year, but I would have been totally jazzed to be the person sitting at the desk there answering the gate buzzer, letting the person in, taking them to Studio B. That would have been really as exciting as anything. Just getting to work in the music world was my fantasy. And so that's a pretty broad arena. I think if I'd set out to be, well, what I really want to do is I want to be a collaborator. If I set out with all the things I ended up doing, I want to be a collaborator for an artist. I want the artist to become really successful. I want to tour with them. I want to play this venue. I want to do that. I want to sell this many copies of a record. Everywhere along the way to that would have felt like impatient and unexciting, because it was all I wanted to do was that. And it was like, really, I wanted to do so much of what we did along the way to where we are. The example I give is like, there's a venue in Los Angeles called the Fonda Theater. And I saw so many shows there growing up. I saw bands I loved, and bands before they got big, and bands when they did a small show, even though they were big. And like we played a headliner there. Billy played a headliner there in October, maybe November of 2018. And that was like, I couldn't even imagine we would get to that venue. Like, that was as big as I ever thought. And then it was like, well, you could do 2 nights there. And it was like, oh my God, we could do 2 nights at the Fonda. Yeah. We put that on sale and it sold out. It's like, you could do 3 nights at the Fonda. We're like, oh my God. And it was like, none of that, like all of that was like already beyond my expectations. And so I think that's like the main thing, is like set the expectations. Like if you love music enough to want to do it, like I don't have to tell you that you love music. You already do. But I think it's really important to define for yourself what you will be proud of, and then just let yourself celebrate that. You know what I mean? I think like, I just know too many people who are not happy where they are, and they're at places where they should be really happy, and they want too much. They have too much hunger for things that, maybe they already achieved and they want to achieve again. And I think that that's sort of the enemy of like inner peace. It's my advice.
I have asked an awful lot of people that question over the years, and I don't think I've ever heard a better answer.
Wow, Ken.
Because I think that it is about, what I try and tell kids when I talk to them is never lose sight of your dreams.
Yep.
But also know that that's the cliche is it's about the journey, and it is about the journey.
It is.
And I was talking to someone earlier today. I never had an expectation that I was going to live the life that I've lived all these years, and so it's probably that much more appreciated because I wasn't. Sure I was. Along the way, there were things I wish I had done that I didn't do or whatever. But the reality is that those of you who are looking to make a life out of music in one way or another, it isn't just about selling millions of copies or downloads or whatever. It is about the intrinsic and the extrinsic joy you get out of creation.
And also your expectations can change, right? Your dreams can change. Like, for instance, when I first started making music, the thing that kicked me into like, I want to be a musician, was I went and saw the band Green Day. And I thought, I want to do exactly what that is. I want to run around a stage in an arena, jamming on a guitar in a band. And like, I haven't done that. Like, I'm not in a band, and, I don't play that kind of music, and that's okay. And for a while that was my full dream. And like, if I were still defining myself by like, am I in a 3-piece pop punk band And are we rocking out? Like, I'm not, but it's okay. I'm doing other things that I love. And so I think it's like, it's cool to redefine what brings you the most joy. And a lot of the time you end up doing things you'd never have anticipated or expected, you know? I don't even think I thought about working with my sister until like the year that I did, you know what I mean? In terms of like, before that, I wasn't 13 thinking when I grow up, I'm going to work with my sister. We're going to have this whole thing. You just let whatever happens happen, and just try to, I always recommend working hard, um, and being, passionate, driven, and giving something your all is not bad advice ever. And I don't super recommend laziness, but I think within the context of that, you're going to be okay.
Well, by virtue of what you've gone through, what we've all gone through this past year, you've demonstrated this kind of like ability to shift
Mhm.
on cue. You know, um, I echo that. I mean, I never again. I started out. I wanted to be a sports writer for a local newspaper. Never did that, but I
So
wanted.
you're a failure, technically, Ken.
I
You're a
am.
failure.
Yeah, I am a failure. Yeah. Unfortunately, my parents are not around to remind me of what a failure I am. We're getting close to wrapping it up. It would be unfair. I won't ask the cliche, well, what's next for you, Phineas?
Sure.
But I will ask it. I mean, I'm curious as to, obviously, there's an uncertainty based upon what's going on outside.
Of course.
Where do you, what are your hopes anyway for the next year?
My hope is that 12 months from right now, we will have played some shows. That would be a real thrill. I know some new music will have come out in the next 12 months from the day that this is. And yeah, I mean, this year has taught a lot of people a lesson in nothing is promised by nature, right? Nothing's guaranteed. But I desperately love playing shows for an audience, and so I would really love to do that again. And as soon as it is safe for everybody in attendance, I will do it. So I hope that comes sooner than later. And I am an optimist this year. I think it will. Last year, 2020, our between you and me, our team was like, all right, maybe in the fall, maybe in the spring of 2021. And I was like, none of this is going to happen. You don't know how long this is going to be. And now that same person is, I think it'll happen. I think we're getting there.
That's both a realistic and an optimistic way of looking at life. And that's pretty good for, what are you, 23? Is that what you are?
23.
Nothing wrong with that. That's good. I just thought of something, but I'll say it. My 5-year-old
Yes.
had one question. I told her that I was going to talk to you. She said she just wanted to know where Ferb was, and I told her I don't think I can ask him that question, but I did.
Anyway.
But he does, but she does know. She knows you and Billy. She's seen. And actually they were at the Grammys last year when they were. I don't know if you saw them or not. They might
These
not.
are grandchildren?
Yeah, my grandchildren.
They were really sweet. I think we met them when we were rehearsing.
I think you did, actually. Yeah. So look, this has been a delight. I knew it would be a delight because you are a delight, and man, you got a great bunch of years ahead of you. And I just love. We want to hear more from you. We want to hear great. You just continue to make great music. I don't know about the rest of it, but the fact of the matter is, both with your sister and on your own, there's no question that you will thrive, and you're going to do great things. You're an extremely talented young guy. It's really.
I appreciate it.
All right. Well, it's a very soft ending, but I guess that's as good as it's going to get. But I thank you again. It really,
Thank
really,
you. Treat to be with you.
great.